And I
Sounds
think we'll
wonderful.
probably end up talking a little bit about that today.
I mean, I'm telling you, when I did my degrees way back when, body mapping was not a thing.
Right.
Or maybe it was and I didn't know about it. So
Right,
when
right.
do you think the whole process of body mapping really took form and shape? When was
Yeah,
that?
that's a really great question. I think the idea of teaching injury prevention to music students is relatively new. I do think we're behind the sports world in that way. And when I was first diagnosed with a playing injury myself, which was 21 years ago, I decided at that time, I had to make a decision whether to stay in music and continue a career as a teacher, as a pedagogue, and as someone who was really emphasizing injury prevention for my students, or if I was going to take a completely different career path and leave the music world. And unfortunately, when I was diagnosed, there was very little information out there about the disorder that I was diagnosed with. I couldn't really find very much information. There was not a lot of information about how to prevent injuries or how to treat injuries for musicians. I found a wonderful facility and doctor in Chicago, but I had to travel to find her. And I think in the past 20 years, it's gradually changing. The National Association of Schools of Music in this country is emphasizing injury prevention for students. And for that reason, a lot of my colleagues in body mapping, in Alexander technique, in Feldenkrais, and other related somatic disciplines, there are more teachers now in conservatories and universities throughout the States, throughout Canada, throughout the world, actually. So it's changing. It's gradual, but it's changing.
Absolutely. It is so important. There's so much to know about it. And like, you had expressed, you've got to really dig to find out.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
this is really an important feature for us teachers to know how to look at it and
Yeah.
what to do with it and how to coach our own students. I'll tell you a quick story while we're waiting for others. I diagnosed a thyroid disorder in a child when I was probably in my, early on, like 8th or 9th year of teaching. And how it went was I was at the student teacher conferences, and the parents sat down, and it was a violist that we were speaking of, my student. And I said, you know what, I am really impressed that he's doing such great work with his private teacher on his vibrato. And honestly, she said, what's vibrato? So I, filled her in, and I was, and she said, I don't think he knows what that is. And, you're at a point in your study as a young child where, your ABCs are first, right? And so I said, the movement, whether it's a wrist vibrato or an arm vibrato, it warms the sound, and I showed her a few examples and whatnot. And she said, oh, is it that shaky thing? I said, well, okay. And honestly, she says, he doesn't know what that is. And I said, you're kidding. And it turned out that he had a tremor that looked literally, you had to fool a musician, right?
Wow.
Looked exactly like a forward wrist vibrato.
Wow.
And it was a large motor skill tremor going on. And he had a massive thyroid disorder when she took him to the doctor, that created these body seizures type thing. And one of them was in his wrist.
Wow.
So it was, of course, as a young teacher, I was walking around tooting my horn. I've diagnosed a medical condition, and not tooting my horn, but feeling pretty proud that through music, we can identify so much, of the medical field,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa. As in, you know, your medical fields need to be diagnosed so that we can, you know, continue our love of music and what we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I really feel like, and I'll be honest with you, my body is wrecked from the double bass.
Mm-hmm.
Years and years of it. And it's a very, very, very physical instrument. I don't think people understand, unless you play bass, how physical it is. Every instrument is physical, but the bass is so large and takes so much strength that I have lower back problems. I have, you know, there's a whole list. And the osteoarthritis is really severe, to the point where it prevents me from practice at times, but I push through. So for me personally, this experience with you is super important if I'm going to continue. I have my disc in my necks, 5 and 6 are worn out, and my doctor, an orthopedic neck surgeon, wanted to operate on me and have me part of a trial. And I said no, because no one's going to touch my, and I know for a fact, well, in my gut and my instinct, that the worn out discs in my neck are from playing.
Lynn, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we are ready. We have everyone here.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
It's perfect. This is a
No,
very
it's
good
great.
warm-up.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe Lynn, we can connect after, and I can share some body mapping colleagues who might be in your area.
I would love that.
That would be great.
Love that.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be amazing. Great. Well, we are already live streaming. I'm so happy also that everyone was able to hear this first introduction live on Facebook, because usually this never happens, and this is so inspiring to see that we are all human and we are all musicians who struggle and go through so many different aspects of life. So knowing this, I want to welcome Dr. Andrée Martin on behalf of the foundation, and I want to express how honored and happy we are to have her here, especially for me, who have been in the position of a student for her classes and have experienced myself in my own skin the wonders of this class, and not just the power of body mapping, but the power of having a pedagogue and an educator that is able to impact you as a student in all forms of art. And for us, that's really, really an honor today. I also welcome everyone that is watching us on Facebook Live and the students that are here on the streaming and the Zoom. And I would like to start by asking Dr. Martin a little bit about her journey. So how did she become a musician? Where does she come from? And how did she end up here with us? So that will be my first question.
Great. Thank you, Samuel. And thank you, Lynn. Thank you for hosting me today. As I said before, I'm so inspired by the work that you're doing, and I'm thrilled to be with you all today. I'm from an island called Newfoundland, which is on the east coast of Canada. And it's a very inspirational, artistic, creative group of people from Newfoundland. And we're 8 generations in the same place, and a lot of my family are musicians. My aunts, uncles, my dad, my sister is a choral conductor in California. My brother works for Bang & Olufsen in Denmark. So there's just a lot of music in our family and a lot of creative, artistic things happening in Newfoundland where I grew up. So I was really fortunate to have amazing experiences, orchestral experiences, and great teachers when I was a young student there. And I did my first 2 degrees in Canada and came to the United States with my husband to do a doctoral degree at Stony Brook, where I got to work with Samuel Barron, my teacher. I was one of his last students before he passed away, and then had the amazing gift to work with Carol Winsence and Tara O'Connor as well at Stony Brook. While I was at Stony Brook, I I took lessons for 3 years in the Alexander technique, which is a somatic discipline that teaches us how to use our bodies really efficiently. And those lessons were really transformative for me. Every week after my lessons, I just felt such relief and such a release of tension in the body. But I found that it was hard to replicate that until I had my next lesson the following week. So it was hard for me to find that same release. So when I began teaching here at the Schwab School of Music, one of my goals was to figure out how to replicate that release and that freedom of tension as I was playing, and to uncover how to teach those ideas to my students, which is how I found body mapping. So body mapping is closely related to the Alexander technique. It's just a different training process and a different method of teaching, but it was developed by two Alexander technique teachers, William and Barbara Conable. So that began my journey at the Schwab School, where I teach both the flute and body mapping, and thought we'd be here for a year or two, and it's been 21. So very fortunate.
That's really, really inspiring and amazing. I think that it's so unique to see the path of every musician and every professor. And I think that that's also inspiring for students and everyone who is watching us, because everyone will have a different path. Everyone will be experiencing different opportunities. And that leads me to the next question. Do you consider that these experiences that you went through your life as a musician, as a professor, as a performer, are the shaping reasons of experiencing or being immersed in body mapping?
So yeah, it's interesting to think about that journey. I'm not sure I would have come to body mapping without having an injury myself. And for that reason, I really feel that the injury, my performance injury, and my performance career up until the point of a career-ending injury is a gift. And it's odd to think about an injury as a gift. I recognize that. But I've come to feel that my role as a teacher is more impactful because I'm able to meet my students in a place where I can hopefully see more of the whole student, some of their physical habits, some of their practice habits, and because of my body mapping training. If I had continued the path of a performer, I think my own awareness and my ability to inhibit tension and analyze poor habits in the practice room really wouldn't have been developed as much. So although my performing, the idea of a career path, I think when I was younger, I certainly had particular goals in mind, and I didn't expect to have that performing path curtailed by an injury, but it certainly has informed my teaching, which for me has really been so rewarding to be able to bring these ideas to my students.
Wonderful. So would you like to tell us a little bit about what body mapping is? And for all of those who have no idea and are watching us from different countries and have never heard of this.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. So as we all know, musicians move as we play. But unfortunately, the pedagogy of movement is not something that's traditionally taught. So we might have been in had an experience in the practice room where we're having a great practice session and we're in the practice room for several hours, and then once we pack up our instruments and leave the room, then we notice we've got some discomfort or pain or tension in the back, but while we're practicing, we didn't notice it because we're so involved in the music, so involved in interpretation, and so involved in kind of repetition of small patterns that the body is a little bit out of our awareness, or maybe a lot out of our awareness. So the process of body mapping allows us to consider, first of all, what the structure of our bony structure is, and to move according to our anatomy. So maybe we can do a little movement experience together. Does that sound like a good idea, Samuel?
Yes,
We can
absolutely.
do that now. Great.
I'm
So
good.
if you're watching with me, I'll just encourage you to let's go ahead and imagine you're washing your hair. So you're going to put your hand on top of your head, or you could put both hands on top of your head if you'll do that. Yep. Great. And so as you've got one hand on top of your head, I want you to go ahead and find your collarbone on that same arm. So you can just trace the collarbone, the clavicle. And just go ahead and experience if you put your arm down by your side with your hand on your collarbone, and then go ahead and bring the hand up again as if you're washing your hair. Just noticing the movement of the collarbone as you do that, back and forth. Yeah. So you can go ahead, even reach your arm all the way up above the head. Notice what the collarbone does there. Just experiment with any movement of the arm, forward or back, and just how the collarbone reacts. And so in body mapping, we might look at, for example, the bony structure of the arm, and note the fact that the arm does not end at what we traditionally call the shoulder, but actually every time we move the arm, ideally, the collarbone is going to come along with the bony structure of the arm. And that's true for the scapula as well. So if you reach forward and back, you can see that the scapula is going to move along with the arm. So if I had what we call a mismapping, if I mismapped my arm as beginning here, or if I mismapped the collarbone, or even just wasn't aware of the collarbone, I might have limited arm movement because of a lack of awareness that the shoulder, that the collarbone and shoulder blade are not part of the arm structure. So we can kind of develop this idea a little further if you want to find that place where the collarbone meets the sternum. So here's the sternum, the breastbone, and the collarbone. You can feel those two bumps on either side. And this is the end of the collarbone where it meets the sternum. It's the sternoclavicular joint. And you can feel that movement if you raise your shoulder and drop your shoulder. Yeah. Or any movement. Again, if you pretend you're going swimming, you can feel movement at this sternoclavicular joint. I understand a lot of our students watching today, scholars watching today, are violinists. So you might even imagine that if you were bowing with the right arm, and excuse me, I'm not a violinist, but how that sternoclavicular joint might be involved in any bowing movement as well. We want to really avoid locking the collarbone in place while we're bowing, which would probably limit the movement of the right arm as you're bowing. So body mapping is a process of really understanding the bony structure, understanding the joints and where they are, understanding how one bone connects to the other, to allow for more freedom and less tension in the body.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, for some reason I hear you perfectly, but the image just on my end is a little bit slow, but the live stream looks perfect. I can see it.
Great.
It's just that for the connection, it goes faster here, so it transmits perfectly there. Okay, so this is wonderful. I get so excited to also remind myself of all these concepts and names and wonderful areas, right? So in this order of ideas, now we understand that body mapping also allows us to work in this active and positive way, understanding our anatomy. So my question would be, because I'm going to now act as one of those students who does not understand or believe or are saying, I was like, okay, but if my teacher is teaching me how to move the bow, why do I would want to be on a body mapping class, for example, or if my teacher is teaching me how to develop my breathing or my posture, why would I want to go to a body mapping class? So here is the question: what is the importance, and how have you seen in your students through the years, and also in yourself, the impact of body mapping for their playing, for their understanding of the bodies, and also for the efficiency of performing?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that important question. I think it's really interesting to think about body mapping as a study that helps every activity. So it doesn't counter great violin teaching. It doesn't counter great flute teaching or counter great bass teaching or piano playing, but rather it aligns with our pedagogy that's in place and really enhances it. So it can be a way of getting at what Feldenkrais called the elusive obvious, those things that we can't see in ourselves, but that other people can see as they're watching us perform or as they're watching us work. And it's a really fascinating study. And I'll ask us all to just try something really simple. If you go ahead and frown with the forehead, and just as you do that, scrunch up your forehead, notice what you feel in the throat or the tongue. Most people, when they do that, notice a real connection between tongue tension and throat tension and forehead tension. We can try the same thing with gripping our toes into the floor or into the shoes. If you go ahead and grip your toes into the floor, if you notice any other whole body pattern associated with gripping your toes. And often my students will tell me, and I can hear it in their sound really as flute players, as soon as they grip their toes into the floor, their abdominal muscles tighten up. There's a lot more tension in the torso. Often the thigh muscles tighten up. So these are the types of things that may not be traditionally in our flute pedagogy. There's not a lot of talk, about forehead tension or about toe gripping, for example, in our flute pedagogy. But that we see that if there are particular habits in movement or with imbalances in the body, which we can talk a little bit about, that uncovering those habits in a body mapping class can really enhance what we're doing in our violin lessons or flute lessons. So some of it is a little bit elusive. Some of it is obvious to other people, or maybe obvious to someone who's teaching Alexander technique or or teaching body mapping. But it can be difficult to get at within a traditional lesson, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yes, and this also makes me think about how many times students and musicians have discomfort and they have certain kind of pain, but they attribute this pain and discomfort to, oh, it means that I'm practicing. Mm-hmm. It means that I'm there in the practice room for hours. So if I don't suffer, I don't improve, or something like that. Okay. So my question would be, how can we make sure that our students are being aware that there should not be pain and that there should not be discomfort? And if there is, we cannot just go so happy, like, oh, this means that I'm practicing, because it's not like going to the gym and breaking the fibers of the muscle so the hypertrophy process happens. No, it's a completely different world. So what would you tell them?
Yeah, well, I think you're providing an opportunity right now for your students who are listening. Just even being an advocate for this information is so important. And even, as I mentioned, 20 years ago, it was nearly impossible for me to find any information on some of the injuries that I was studying. So I do think there are more platforms like the one you're providing today, which is so important, and I'm so grateful for. But I do think that often with my students and with myself, as I was beginning to learn body mapping and to incorporate some of these ideas, not only do we instantly find some relief in the body, and it can be instant, it can be just a matter of realigning the lumbar spine to balance on the sit bones, for example, which can provide a lot of release in the upper torso and the trapezius muscles, just as an example. But often what I find for my students is that, and for those with whom I work in master classes, is that the difference in their sound production and technical facility is instant. So I don't need to convince them that it's a good idea, because they instantly hear that the facility is easier, there's more even technique. Something as simple as, for example, I work with a lot of really wonderful guitarists who are students of Dr. Andrew Zone, who is my colleague here. And guitar is a really wonderful example of an instrument where, because they're seated and because it's asymmetrical, it's really easy to get into a position where your legs are headed in one direction and your torso is headed in another direction. And then also that reliance of the eyes on the fingers on the left hand is pretty common in the guitar world. And you'll watch Dr. Zone's students will eventually come to this place where the shoulders are aligned over the hip bones, and the balance of the guitar in the hands just allows them to provide more balance and freedom in the neck. And suddenly that left arm is much more facile. They're able to trust the tactile sense rather than just the visual sense. We do a lot of work with guitarists where we actually put blindfolds on them to increase the tactile sense and decrease the visual sense, which gives them a lot more awareness of what's going on in the torso. So just again, that idea that holding tension somewhere can and does affect somewhere else in the body, just like we saw with the forehead and the tongue, or the toes and the abdominal muscles. The same is true if you're a guitarist and you're corkscrewing around to the torso is turning to the left and your head is turning to the left to look at your hand, the facility of the left hand is going to be reduced. So finding freedom, students are often just able to instantly feel that there's just a lot more flexibility and freedom and inhibition of tension. So it's such an important complement to our work as in our applied studios.
Thank you so much. And we are starting to get questions, and I'm going to start dropping them in alongside what we are doing. So one of the questions that we are often asked here through the chat, and also I'm getting messages, is where can they find these kind of platforms and information when they are not in the US?
Great. So I would start at bodymap.org, which is our professional organization. It's the Association for Body Mapping Education, a wonderful group of teachers and interested affiliates who offer webinars, usually monthly webinars. And some of those are for beginning body mapping students who've never heard of this information before. And some are for people who are training to teach body mapping. So there's a wealth of opportunities on that website. There are a lot of great resources and articles as well. There's a wonderful DVD, maybe that's a bit old-fashioned now, but there's actually a digital download of the same DVD called Move Well, Avoid Injury. And that's by Barbara Conable and Amy Lykar, which is just a wonderful overview of the body mapping course. We are now becoming more international, which is really exciting. We've offered our first body mapping webinar in Spanish, and we'll be offering some in French as well. So our body mapping world is growing, but I would also look regionally. Body mapping is just one of many somatic disciplines. So you could look for Feldenkrais teachers in your region. You could look for Alexander technique teachers, body mapping teachers. There are a lot of really wonderful resources online, and those are related disciplines. But those particular resources, the website, bodymap.org, and the digital download of Move Well, Avoid Injury those are probably good places to start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I also want to mention that we have here with us today, right now, the president of the board of the ACME, which is the Association for Body Mapping and Education that Dr. Andrée mentioned. And you know what a privilege that is. And to have her here, and I want to recall on this for my students and for all the students that are watching us today, because this is what we call in our foundation a human resource. She is a resource that have given her time to be with us today and to share about her passion and her work. And this is so valuable to us. So if you have questions, we are going to greatly share her email and contact information, and you can reach out to her at any time or go to the website that she mentioned and just find this information. And the only thing needed is the desire and the curiosity to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
I should say, sorry to interrupt you, Samuel, but I've recently handed over the presidency to my colleague, Dr. Jackie McElwain, who is at the University of Southern Mississippi. So I was privileged to have served on that board and learned so much from my colleagues, but have I'm no longer the president, but I was, so thank you for sharing that. But the resources that you'll find on that website, both the people resources, the human resources, and the book resources, articles, the research that's being done, that's a really wonderful place to start. Absolutely.
So my line of information was outdated. It's wonderful. So I would also like to introduce the world of meditation to our students and what you have done with us through this class. And many of them has been asking me, well, when I'm going to practice or when I'm going to perform, I try to close my eyes and meditate, or I try to relax because I suffer from anxiety, or I always get nervous before playing. And I found so amazing every little exercise and meditation and preparation that we did before our practice sessions and after. And I would like you to share with them a little bit about that, because it's just so powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So you can see my little meditation setup back here. Actually, this is my space for meditating. Meditation has been so powerful and transformative in my life, and I've been meditating for fairly regularly since my daughter was born, and she's now 13. And over the period of the quarantine, I decided to formalize my practice in terms of bringing it into my teaching by starting a certification at Brown University in mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I just finished my first level of training with that wonderful group of teachers and my colleagues at that school. And so now it's interesting to incorporate body mapping with the teaching of meditation. I think those are really powerful allies in really understanding our whole selves as musicians, in being present on the stage, in really understanding that as when we get up on stage, that the audience wants to connect with us in that moment, rather than presenting almost like playing or pushing play on a record player. You know what I mean? We don't want to just create a performance that is a cookie cutter performance of something that we've created in the practice room, but actually really connecting with those who are in the room, in that space at that time. And it creates such a powerful connection among the people who are there to listen to you perform. And I think meditation is a way to help us train as musicians to do that. We really can understand and observe what's happening in the body as it's happening, understand our thoughts, understand a way to communicate more authentically and more from the heart as musicians, and even with our language. So the other piece of this that I think is really maybe interesting for musicians, and this is something I wish I'd learned about when I was a young student, is the idea of constructive rest. So constructive rest is a practice that is taught within Alexander technique pedagogy and body mapping pedagogy, where we're actually lying on the floor, semi-supine with the knees up toward the ceiling, and really releasing the body weight into the floor and taking time to understand how to release tension, how to understand our body's maps, how to connect with our breathing in a really direct way and understand what our habits are regarding breathing. There are a lot of great resources online, guided constructive rest that you could look for. In terms of meditation resources, there are a lot of really wonderful guided meditations. You could download an app if that's something that would be supportive for you. Headspace is a good place to start, and I often provide that app for my students. Actually, our university provides it for free for our students, which is a really wonderful resource. So if you're interested in meditation and don't know where to start, that's probably where I would suggest. And in terms of guided constructive rests, you're welcome to email me and I can send you my list that I send to my classes. Sometimes we do, at the end of a semester, we'll do a 30-day constructive rest challenge, right? When everybody's getting stressed out at the end of the semester, preparing for exams and juries and recitals, just encouraging students to take 10-15 minutes in a day to lie down and to reset and to release all that tension. It can really change the rest of your day if you just take 10 minutes to do that. Our bodies remember when we come back to upright what it felt like to be on the floor. And we have this kind of renewed sense of balance and freedom from tension in the body after a constructive rest session. So I'll share with you that I was meeting with a couple of my students a few weeks ago, and we were to meet at a particular time. I was in my office and the door was closed. I was meeting with another student. I opened my door of my office and there are my two students lying on the floor outside my office door doing a constructive rest session. So I was super excited to see that. Just anywhere you can find the space, whether it's, on the floor outside your teacher's office or in your practice space, it doesn't take much space or time, but it can really enhance your practice session because it allows you time to kind of integrate your body and your mind and your energy and your intentions, that your intentions for that practice session or your performance are really, really purposeful and really what you mean for that particular piece. So, but I'm happy to share those resources with you.
If I may, I taught middle school for a very long time, and some of the data of middle school learners and that age group is that they need to reset their brains every 7 minutes. Now, if you think about that with body mapping and, being a musician, that seems like a very short amount of time. But if you go ahead and put a stopwatch on, 7 minutes feels very long. Mm-hmm. But what we don't realize is the awareness, like you say, that we have to be aware of when to reset. So, with the data that I know, middle schoolers is every 7 minmes, is to make yourself aware. And so I would teach my students, and this is probably, me being older, not knowing enough about body mapping, I was actually incorporating it without knowing. So every 7 minutes in my orchestral setting, we would put the instruments down, we would turn the lights out, we would breathe for 15-20 seconds. and
Oh,
then
that's
we would
wonderful.
start again. And it does give a mental refresh.
Right, right.
So to all of those young students, learn about your body mapping and then learn techniques that will help you with that. For example,
Absolutely.
and I want to ask you to interject your techniques that go right along with body mapping. I would have my little ones do mnemonics and come up with the word star. And while they're practicing, the S stands for stance. Are you mindful of your stance? The T stands for tension, wherever that might be in your body. The A stands for are you aware? And check your star as you're practicing so that you can be a star, right? And
I love that.
incorporate these ideas. Another thing, so I think I was teaching them to be aware, but didn't really connect it with the full body mapping that you're speaking of. I know that kindergartners, as little as age 5 and age 6, we are doing small yoga breaks, and I would take yoga breaks with my kindergartners in a 45-minute music class every 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes, they need to move. So I think it's imperative, if we look at ourselves, to connect who we are with what we need. And, you know, I am somebody that suffers from ADD. I've had many students that suffer from ADHD. And with this in mind, their body mapping and the techniques they use may be very different.
Yes.
Because of more physiological needs, because of more mental capabilities. It's a secret recipe for each player. And I think that what works for one doesn't work for another. And we really need to keep that in mind. And I'm just so excited to learn all there is to know about body mapping so that maybe I can correct some of the issues I'm having with my discs in my neck, or to not put so much pressure on them. I tend to lean my head to the right when I'm playing double bass. I've always lined my hips up. I've always balanced the instrument on myself. The instrument of the double bass is never held up with your left hand, which for so many young players, that's what they see. So that's what they do, right? So when we're teaching all of this, it's so great. And I wish I had met you, 40 years ago when I was 10, just starting the double bass, so that I could be aware of what to do and take time to do that. Because that's going to make me a much more emotional player. And isn't it about connection, what we do? Absolutely. Connect with ourselves, connect with the communities, connect with other people, and share the love of music.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that also leads me to the last two questions of today's interview. And one of them comes from our students and the other one comes from me. So I'm going to start with mine. What is the legacy, or how do you see body mapping in the future? What are your hopes for body mapping in the future? We know that we are privileged at the Schroep School of Music to have this class, but not many other institutions or different countries and music schools around the world have this opportunity. So what is your vision, and how would you like to see body mapping present in the music world?
Thank you, Samuel. I kind of wish we didn't need to teach the class, because it would be nice if we taught ourselves out of a job, in a way. that the ideas around alignment and freedom and awareness and inhibiting tension were taught from a very young age, and therefore we didn't need to kind of, as adults or as college students, then reevaluate how we're thinking about our playing and find our habits. So it would be nice eventually to not need body mapping. But I do think one of the reasons, as I mentioned at the very beginning of our chat, one of the reasons I decided to stay in music, even though I was no longer able to perform, was in order to become a really public voice about musicians' injuries. And as soon as I was diagnosed, well, within a year or so, I started writing articles for flute journals and just talk a little bit about focal dystonia and do workshops and just try to get a public voice out there. And I think at the time, there weren't a lot of people doing that. So I think in terms of where we're headed, the legacy of where we're headed, I hope is that we can really talk about musicians' injuries and prevention of injuries when they happen, before they happen, in a really open way, so that we can share with our students ways to prevent these things from happening for them. But it is exciting to see, you know, the National Association of Schools of Music is really encouraging musculoskeletal health for students in colleges throughout the country. And I think as that becomes more standard, the ideas will spread. I'm really grateful to be at an institution where our curriculum, university curriculum committee approved the body mapping course as a wellness course within the general education core. And I think we're one of the few places in the country where that's happened. So now our music education students who actually don't have any electives in their degree can take body mapping as their wellness credit for general education. So, you know, it really is amazing. And so seeing that advocacy from our administrators is something that I've fought for, but I feel like I have the support of my colleagues who supported that process of having these classes become credits within different areas of the core. So yeah, I foresee there's been so much change in the past 20 years in terms of, you know, every music journal that you open now is there's a lot of information about where to go if you have an injury, or kind of networks of people who could be helpful, or things like Feldenkrais and Alexander technique, body mapping, yoga. That's completely changed in 20 years. So I'm excited to see 20 years from now where we will be in terms of the openness of those discussions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And the last question comes from one of our youngest students, and it would be, she's very concerned on what to do when she doesn't know if she is doing it right or not, if the pain comes from bad technique or not. And she's 9. So I would like you to have this final question, your advice for her and for everyone, because I'm sure that we have all been there.
Absolutely. So one of the important things in our code of ethics is that if there is pain, first we see a physician. If I have a student contact me and say, I'm having difficulties because I have pain in my arm, the first thing I have them do is see a doctor and not come see me. It's really important that we rely on our medical professionals. So once you have a diagnosis and you feel that body mapping might be a good complement to healing, then you can certainly, I mean, you're welcome to call me. You can have your student reach out to me. I'm more than happy to meet with her on Zoom if it's okay with her teacher. But that's the other thing I think is really important for body mapping teachers, to work with the applied teachers really directly, so that students are getting this open dialogue among applied teachers and body mapping teachers together. But it's really important to start with a medical professional and to get a proper diagnosis. And then once you have that information, then to go from there. But feel free, Samuel, to share my information if you would do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And for everyone that is watching us on the live stream and here in the Zoom, we will be sending an email with all this information and the links to the websites that Dr. Andrée Martin mentioned. And we are just so excited and honored to have had you today for this interview with our students and everyone who is watching us online. We also want you all to know that this interview will be also going on our YouTube channel, so it will be available for you all to watch it again, and it will also stay on Facebook. So I want to say thank you, Dr. Martin, for being with us today. This has been such a wonderful pleasure and honor. And thank you everyone who came for the interview. And well,
Thank you all.
on
Thank you
behalf
so
of
much.
the,
Thank you, Samuel.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samuel.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. It was a pleasure
You're
meeting
more than
you.
welcome. Thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity, and feel free to reach out with any questions. And yeah, I look forward to being in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much and have a great
Thank
day.
you again.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.